Hello, everyone. Hello, I am Tara Murray, Special Assistant to the President and Deputy Director of the White House Office of Public Engagement, and I'd like to welcome you here to the White House. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm an African-American woman. I am thrilled and honored to join you today for this roundtable in celebration of Black History Month and to serve as your moderator for today's event. We liken the Office of Public Engagement to a bridge because we connect the public to the president. Our role is to ensure that the public knows about the president's accomplishments, to serve as advisors to the broader Biden-Harris administration on the diverse perspectives within each community we serve, and to connect the administration with impactful community leaders across the nation. It is in that vein that we are hosting today's event with young Black disabled leaders from across our country. Since day one, the Biden-Harris administration has centered equity as a priority. There are millions of people with disabilities who operate at the intersection of identities. According to the CDC, disability impacts 1 in 4 Black people in the United States. The Office of Public Engagement recognizes that the disability community is part of every community. And with the help of our disability liaison, Anna Perng, we are looking to strengthen our relationships with diverse leaders within this community. The truth is, diversity and inclusion is not just about individuals. It is about the promise of the American dream for all. It is about working hard and working together to make changes to policies that improve the lives of all Americans and to make this country a more stronger and a more perfect union. My colleagues from the Domestic Policy Council and representatives from federal agencies who are represented here today will spend a little more time diving into what the administration is doing. This is about showing up today with intentionality. But let me step away from the broad ideas and principles for a moment and talk about what Black disabled leadership looks like. Real, true leadership. This last year, we lost Lois Curtis. Lois Curtis was a disability icon. She was also a Black woman with an intellectual disability. Her battle for the freedom to live in community changed the disability landscape forever and laid the foundation for much of today's home and community-based services. It is an impact that has already been felt and will continue to be felt in the lives of people with disabilities for generations to come. As audience members tuning in today, I urge you to listen to the work that is being done by the Biden-Harris administration, to think about what you individually can do to support and promote these efforts. But more than that, I hope you will talk with us about where we're falling short, because we truly want to hear from you. We want to hear how we can work together with you and help make things better. There is a wealth of knowledge and expertise and commitment in this room, and I am just extremely grateful to be here with you as we move forward, and I'm excited to see what we can do together. And with that, I'd like to turn the program over to my colleague from the Domestic Policy Council, Amber Green.
Thank you so much, Tara. Good morning, everyone, and happy Black History Month. It's a pleasure to speak with you all this morning. My name is Amber Green. I'm the Special Assistant to the President for Racial and Economic Justice, and my work includes implementation of the President's Day 1 Executive Order on Equity. But good news is last week, the President signed his second Executive Order on Equity. So we have a lot of work to do, and we're looking forward to working with each of you to make sure that agencies continue to meet that mandate. So as I mentioned, on the first day in office, the President signed an executive order advancing racial equity and support for underserved communities throughout the federal government. That historic order charged the federal government with the enormous cost of looking at the human cost of systemic racism and persistent poverty, and provided a powerful and first-of-its-kind mandate to change and really challenge agencies to change the status quo. For the first time in history, the President made sure that equity and racial justice were embedded within the decision-making processes for the whole of the federal government. So what does that mean in practice? So over the past 2 years, agencies have taken historic steps, implementing new programs, figuring out where there's inequities that exist, barriers to access programs and services, and coming up with solutions to do that. I believe some of my colleagues will share some of the good work that they're doing at their agencies as well. But that made it real. It changed the way that we were doing things, and it made it so that we would make sure that the promise of America could be realized for everyone. As the President has said, equity is not a one-year project, it's not a 2-year project, it is a generational commitment, and it takes each of us at the table each and every day to make sure that we realize that promise. And by signing the second executive order, the President has further solidified his commitment to ensure that promise for communities of color, tribal communities, rural communities, people with disabilities, LGBTQI+ individuals, women and girls, and communities impacted by persistent poverty. And one of the key things that I think my colleague Tara mentioned as well is that we can belong to multiple such communities. And different things impact us different ways because of that. But they should also be celebrated. And as persons with disabilities, as African Americans with disabilities, everyone is deserving of equity, deserving of dignity, respect, and equal opportunity, including economic opportunity. And so that's why this administration has identified ways that we can figure out where there's inequities in programs, addressing the disproportionate use of school discipline on Black disabled children, supporting Black families with children with disabilities, strengthening non-discrimination in healthcare, and increasing employment and apprenticeship opportunities for persons with disabilities, including African Americans. So with this order, it really charges us to really think about how do we make things better? How do we make things equitable, just, and fair for everyone? And I'm really pleased to be able to share more information and talk with you more today about what we can do to even strengthen our efforts even further. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amber. I'd now like to turn the program over to Assistant Secretary Taryn Williams, who serves in the Office of Disability Employment Policy at the U.S. Department of Labor.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. I am so thrilled to be here this morning. So happy Black History Month. I am delighted to be sitting alongside colleagues and also disabled leaders from around our community. As you heard, I'm Taryn Williams. I have the privilege of serving as Assistant Secretary for Disability Employment Policy within the U.S. Department of Labor. And in that role, I lead the Office of Disability Employment Policy, or ODEP for short. I use the pronoun she, her. I am a Black woman, and I am wearing an orange blazer and a rather aggressively multicolored scarf this morning. And for those of you who aren't familiar with ODEP, we are a sub-cabinet level agency within the Department of Labor, charged with increasing both the number and the quality of employment opportunities for all people with disabilities and all job seekers with disabilities. And that is why we are so thrilled to be in the midst of working to advance the goals that the administration has, as exemplified in the administration's and President Biden's most recent executive order to advance equity last week. One of our priorities during this administration has been to examine our entire portfolio to identify ways to be more equitable and to respond to the needs of all workers with disabilities, including Black workers with disabilities. Doing so is essential to our mission. We know that in these communities and truly in our communities, there are both higher rates of disability and higher rates of unemployment. We do this work in multiple ways, but one of them is in conducting research and examining the impact of Black workers and Black workers with disabilities on our labor force. So for example, ODEP will soon be, it's forthcoming, releasing a data spotlight on the contributions of Black workers to Black workers with disabilities in the trades. Of all Black workers with disabilities, we know that 23.6%, or more than 273,000 workers, work in the trades. And we conduct these analyses to both raise awareness of employment trends with people with disabilities, but also to examine what's on the horizon for job seekers and workers with disabilities, particularly as we are in the midst of wide-scale investments in local communities. This research, in addition to other model demonstration projects we have planned to increase equity in transition, are critical to how we do our work. We know that without quality research, without quality data that examines equity, we cannot know our impact, and we can't begin to change and transform the experiences both in education and in employment for the Black community, and particularly for Black people living with disabilities. So again, I am so thrilled for the conversation today, and I will now turn it over to my colleague, Valerie.
Thank you so much, Assistant Secretary Taryn Williams. We're now going to hear from Valerie Williams, who's the Director in the Office of Special Education Programs in the Department of Education. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I too am very, very excited to be here with this panel today. Looking forward to the conversation that comes behind this, because we have questions and we want to learn, and we have information that we need to get from you so we can do our jobs better. But my name is Valerie Williams, and I go by the pronouns she, her. I am wearing olive green. Nothing bright on me. But I serve as the Director of the Office of Special Education Programs. I am of no relation to my partner in crime sitting next to me, Assistant Secretary Taryn Williams. No blood relation, but we do both, we are sisters in the community that want to make sure that infants, toddlers, youth, and adults with disabilities get what they need. In her world, it is in employment, and in my world, it is in education. I advise the leadership at the U.S. Department of Education on policy matters related to early childhood for students with disabilities, for those who need services, and for special education. So we're talking about birth through 21. And all this is made possible, thankfully, by the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which is long-standing law, been on the books since 1975. And we are still working to make sure that we live up to the promise of educating our students with disabilities. What OSEP does is to provide money to the states so that they can provide the special education services that our students need. And through a process that we call monitoring, we check in on those states, see how funds are being spent, and more importantly, see what the outcomes are for our students in those states. And when we see that states are in need of assistance, or when they are in need of some type of help, we provide that help and that support. Sometimes it takes the form of guidance, which is something in writing, and it could be on a specific topic. And most recently, something that's been mentioned numerous times now, we did some guidance on discipline. And so what we found is that, and our discipline is not just what most people think of as discipline, it is suspensions, expulsions. It touched on restraint and seclusion, which is not, I will repeat, is not an evidence-based academic practice. Touched on informal removals, and pretty much anything that removes a student from the academic environment for punitive reasons is discipline. And so we did extensive guidance on that, and we felt the need to be vocal on this subject because we have studies and research that shows that discipline is disproportionately used on Black boys and students with disabilities. And so it was past time for us to come out and indicate that this is not something that we want to see continued, definitely in our school system. What we also do at OSEP is we provide grant funding to nonprofits and colleges and universities for a variety of things, whether it's personnel development, because we know we're dealing with massive teacher shortages right now, technology, and we also fund a network of parent training and information centers in every state that are vital to our work. So we do a lot of things at OSEP and at the Department of Education, and we have a relatively new initiative, and it's called Raise the Bar, Lead the World, and that's what we are hoping to do in education. Thank you. I see a big smile. Like, raise the bar. Yes, we are going to raise the bar. And that's the department's call to action to transform our pre-K through 12 educational system, because what we've been through in the last handful of years is something that no one has ever had to go through, and we have this federal funding, and we have the best minds at work. So let's figure out how we can change and how we can do things differently so that we can respond to the needs of all of our students. And while we do that, we at OSEP want to make sure that we all maintain and keep in mind the needs of our students with disabilities. So whether we are talking about academic excellence and academic recovery, and supporting the conditions that are needed for that, whether it is accelerated learning, taking the form of, say, tutoring or after-school programs or summer learning or a variety of things. Access to strong STEM learning, STEM and arts for students with disabilities, because students with disabilities are general education students first, and we cannot forget them in all the work that we do. So we are constantly echoing that. And pretty much all the things that we know are good for all students, we should keep those in mind when we talk about students with disabilities. Also thinking about boldly improving learning conditions, something we've been talking about for the last number of years, being brave, being bold, and being urgent, because there is no better time than right now to do the work that needs to be done. And we have an administration that is supportive of everything that needs to be done. This all falls into the vein of equity, which is giving everyone what they need, not giving everyone the same thing, but giving them what they need. That's what equity is at its base level. So how can we improve learning conditions for all students? How can we work to improve working conditions for school personnel? Because that's important. How can we eliminate for good the teacher shortage, which impacts everything that is going on in our buildings on a regular basis? And not just for teachers, but for those instructional support personnel, the physical therapists, the occupational therapists, speech language pathologists, school social workers, school counselors, all of those folks, right, that help round out the team of what provides services to all students in our school buildings. And generally just invest in mental health and well-being. So after we start marching through that, how do we create pathways for our students? Because when they leave us in the K through 12 setting, we want there to be somewhere for them to go. And that's critical, because our job is not just to get our kids from elementary to middle school or middle school to high school, and we even want them to graduate, but what are they walking into when they leave the school building? That's what we're concerned about. And so in order for that to happen, we need to make sure that our students have a seamless, and I want to emphasize seamless, pathway to what happens when school is over. That's critical. Whether that is college, whether that is career, entrepreneurship, whatever it happens to be, whatever they choose for themselves, whatever their vision is, we need to be there to support it. And in order for that to happen, we need to be proactive. We need to have individualized, meaningful, and comprehensive transition planning. And you'll be hearing more about that from the Office of Special Education in the very near future. And that's a lot, but there's so much more that we're doing at OSEP and in OSERS with all of our dedicated and really passionate staff. So I want to say again, just like everyone else has said, that I am thrilled and very excited to be here and to take part in this conversation. And we just want to know what we can do to better support everyone else that sits at this table with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ms. Williams. I'm now going to turn the program over to Sherman Gillum Jr., who is the Director in the Office of Disability Integration and Coordination at the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA. Mr. Gillum, over to you.
Thank you, ma'am. Good morning. I have a very boring gray suit jacket on with a black shirt. My daughters tell me my skin is almond colored, I guess, mocha, whatever, some shade of brown, and I have a shiny bald head. So that'll give you a picture of the face behind the voice. But before I talk about my work, I want to thank the Biden-Harris administration for taking the very important step of saying to a lot of people, not only with the executive order that was issued last week, but this event, that I see you. There are 47.5 million black people in this country. That's 47.5 million ways of being black in this country. And there's no one identity that represents everybody. And that's why it's so important for all of us in the individual ways we show up in the skin we're in, to be ourselves, to be uniquely ourselves, and that may, at times, being differently able than the people we see around us. This society hasn't always been kind to people who are black or who are disabled. Having both has created a very complicated way of being. In fact, if you were black, that was regarded as a disability in some instances, and if you protested oppression, protest psychosis was your diagnosis used to put you in an asylum or experiment upon you. So having an actual disability made it hard for people historically to be black and identify with the pride of being disabled, if there was such a thing, because it was almost a double disadvantage. But history also has documented the progress, the tremendous progress that has been made, because people like those of us at this table have decided that we're going to be ourselves and not hide from society and to be out front. So what I get to do in the work that I do at the Department of Homeland Security and FEMA is ensure that we don't repeat the mistakes of Hurricane Katrina. My office was established after the images of people being left behind and abandoned shocked the conscience of a nation enough to pass a law that established my very role. So I'm the only person in the country who advises the administrator and in turn the president on matters related to disaster preparedness and emergency management through the lens of disability integration and coordination. So what that means is I ensure that people like us at this table are not only not left behind, but when we are quote unquote rescued, that we're not forced to live like refugees in our own reality, in shelters, in transitional homes that don't see us and allow us to function and disenable people who have located their independence and function before the disaster, and somehow it was taken away because people don't understand that if you give me what I need, I don't need you as much. Don't disenable me with your emergency shelters that don't have ramps, that, housing that doesn't recognize that, again, I'm independent if I have what I need. Don't punish me for requiring assisted devices and aids, a service dog, a personal care attendant. And so what I do literally is when there's a disaster, I've been to Puerto Rico, the Ponce Municipality, I've been in Lee County in Florida after Hurricane Ian, I was just in Selma, Alabama a couple of weeks ago to feel what it feels like to be in that space with an apparent disability and desiring nothing else but to be as on the same footing as everybody else with respect to my recovery and chance at recovery. That's what equity means. It doesn't mean we're all at the same starting line, but it means don't put me in a hole and then call that equality. That's what it really means. And so the executive order, by making equity a mandate, it forced us to think out of the abstract. What does equity mean? It's not just an aspiration anymore. What I did, even before I took over this role in August of last year, I began to think about what equity actually means in practice. It doesn't mean that you give me a ramp and that's equity. It means that before there's a disaster, I'm at the table speaking to my needs. So you're not trying to make up for all the time you missed by leaving me away from the table. So I spend a lot of time right now going to communities, talking to young leaders about what that place at the table means and the importance of having them talk about that so that they're not trying to find their humanness during a crisis. You were human before that, and we need you to speak to that. And even with the train derailment, there's a lot of questions there about what does it mean to be equitable when you think about the number of people who are in panic. Survival of the fittest sort of kicks in, and what does that really mean? And when you see assistive nursing facilities and you see schools with kids with needs that are different from everyone else, you're not doing them a favor by treating them like human beings. They're supposed to be on equal footing, and that's the sign of a civil society. So I spent a lot of time with my staff evaluating equity in real terms and what it actually means to be equitable. What do we count? Well, we look at risk. What's the risk to a population when you know that people are power dependent, when you know that somebody with kidney dialysis? And so what we did before Hurricane Fiona hit is we worked with the Centers for Independent Living to ensure that those people who are going to be affected by blackouts got doctor's appointments earlier, and their doctors worked with them to prepare for the moment when the lights will be out for prolonged periods and they will be left alone. And we made sure that they understood this: you're not by yourself. You may not be able to call us and get on the internet and all that stuff, but we are thinking about you. And I think at a minimum, that's where it starts. That's where equity really starts. So I'm blessed to have that role. It's an important role because, again, it's based on a mistake, but despite the amount of time that has passed, we don't get do-overs, we just get do-betters. And we have to do better each time. So I'll be interested in hearing from these young people about their leadership in this space. I think of the image of the 3 young men lying on the ground with police pistols drawn. They were looking up at the police officers, their hands were up, and they were on their stomachs, but they were deaf and couldn't comply because they couldn't hear. And they don't have "I'm deaf" written on their chest or their forehead. When I saw that Raven was going to be here, I said, you all are so important, more than you know. And there's a lot of people doing some of the work, but they need new energy and fresh blood to fill those spaces. And so I'll be listening to all of you talk about your respective roles and the work that you do with an eye toward figuring out, how do I recruit you into the effort to help me save lives of people? So I do have some questions, but I'll be looking forward to an engaging conversation about that. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gillums, and thank you for the work that you're doing. Thank you for the reminder and just the pointing out that as Black people, we're not a monolith. And it's so important that we hear from all of our diverse opinions and perspectives. When we thought about this program and we thought about programming for Black History Month, it was critically important for me and for us to bring in these young leaders who you have before you today and who I'm going to turn it over to, because their voices are so critically important, but are often, not heard and not listened to and acknowledged as often as they should be. And so it is my privilege and honor now to turn over this program to hear from our youth leaders. We're going to start with Sean Aliang, who is the advisor on President Biden's Committee for People with Intellectual Disabilities. Over to you, Sean.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sean Ali Long. Before I get started, I just want to say that I am honored to be here with so many individuals, especially Africans Americans that have the disability, because why I do what I do, because let's just face it, and just like Mr. Sherman say, when you is African American and black, the odds is stacked up against you even more. So through my work, I make sure that I also advocate for all people with the disability, but I make sure that I keep a special lens on those that is black, because my motto is we cannot progress as a nation until everyone have a piece of the freedom. We say that this is a nation for all people, and I believe in my heart that my disability is not a handicap, it's not a curse, but what it is, it's a ordained blessing so that I can help make change in policy so that people like myself don't have to struggle. People with disabilities should not have to be begging to just have independence. They should not be begging to just want to be a part of the dream. We say in the Constitution what that life, liberty, prosperity, and thank you, pursuit of happiness. So that means those who have disabilities need to be included. A little bit more about what I do. I'm a Temple student. I'm studying law and finance. Of course, I sit on the buying the president committee for intellectuality, but before that, I was appointed to Mayor Kenney Police Advisory Board because I believe that we have to change the system that is stacked against our people. And we need to train officers so that they can recognize where a individual that have a disability, they need to have more patience and due diligence with them. And I believe that we can be a successful nation, but we had to progress to that mark. Are we at that mark? If I can be honest, no, we not. There's a long way that we have to go. Because we as a people have to also educate the African American community on disabilities. There's a lot of ableism in the African American community that we have to sort out. But I'm hoping that today that we can come together and bring a change that will shape this nation so that all people with disabilities can know that they are valued, they are respected, and they have a say-so in the democracy that they so live in. And I just had to say this. Growing up, my mom always told me, you don't have to conform to what society say about you. She say, baby, hold your hair up. She said, even though you have a disability, you can be who you want to be. I have a teacher that told me the only thing you will be able to do is stop south or flip burgers at McDonald's. And I told him, I'm going to prove you wrong. Now I'm in college with a 3.56 GPA because I believe as a African American, we have more power than society say about us. And I'm just saying this again, I'm humbled to be here, to be among the experts so that we can move this country forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing that. That was so powerful. And thank you for your passionate advocacy. Great things ahead for you. Great things now and great things ahead. As a mother of a Black son, I am just moved to hear how your mother encouraged you. And so thank you for sharing with us. All right, I'm going to turn it over now to Elijah Armstrong, who is the founder of the Human Armstrong Award. Elijah, over to you.
Hi. Yeah, I want to echo what everyone said. I'm really honored to be here with so many experts. A bit about me. I'm Elijah Armstrong. I'm an epileptic. I'm from Jacksonville, Florida. I went to high school at a public high school called Stanton College Preparatory School. And the lights in my math classroom, my junior year, they flickered and they caused me to have seizures literally every other day. So I'm not sure if y'all are familiar with high schools, A day, B day. So literally every other day at 10 in the morning, I would walk into this classroom, seize, have to go to the hospital. My mom would take me home. I'd be on IV medicine. It would ruin the rest of my day, oftentimes the beginning of the next day as well. Fought as hard as I could for about 3 weeks to try to get through that. It was obviously not sustainable. So I went to my guidance counselor and I asked her for an accommodation. Also, a bit of context, my high school was ranked at the time the 3rd best high school in the nation by Newsweek. So when I went to my guidance counselor and asked her for an accommodation, she told me that Stanton didn't do accommodations, that I would need to leave the school for the integrity of the program. And I would just also like to echo some advice that I received from my mother. Whenever I was a kid and acting up, my mom would look at me and say, Elijah, I am not the one.
Sounds like a
So
black month.
in the spirit of that, I refused to let this go. We reached out to newspapers. We got a lawyer. We sued the school. Actually, I would like to give a quick shout out to Assistant Secretary of Department of Education, Catherine Lehman, who oversees the Office for Civil Rights, because that work is so important. I would not have been able to graduate high school if there weren't people on the federal level who were advocating and enforcing civil rights laws, because unfortunately, politicians on the state level in Florida don't always do that. I'll leave that there. Yeah, so they told me I was not qualified to go to high school, that I was not qualified to do high school math. So I went on to Penn State immediately after I graduated. I founded Equal Opportunities for Students, which is a nonprofit I run in order to advance the voices of marginalized students so that they know their rights and they know where to go when situations like this happen, and students can tell their stories about the things that they experienced. Immediately after graduating from Penn State, I went to the Harvard Graduate School of Education to get my master's. I remind the people I went to high school with about that fact all the time, because I do agree that when they tell you that you can't do something, when you prove them wrong, they need to remember where you were at and where you're at now. So yeah, being humble is great, but also sometimes you gotta flex. And then immediately after graduating from the Harvard Graduate School of Education, I was thinking a lot about where I was before and about the importance of being able to tell your story and all of the supports that I was lucky enough to be able to receive. So I founded the Human Armstrong Award, which is a scholarship for students with disabilities. I run it with Judy Human, who I'm sure all of you know. If you don't, the reason it's named after Judy Human is because she got polio when she was a child. She survived polio and is now a wheelchair user, and her elementary school told her she was not going to be able to attend because she was a fire hazard. And it's remarkable because she is 50 years older than I am, and there's so many historical through lines between her story and my story, and the hundreds of stories that I read every year of students who are applying from elementary school to middle school to high school to all forms of higher education, who are experiencing the same kind of ableism and are being told that their disability, regardless of what it is, means that they're not qualified to go to school. So really, that's what I do. I run this scholarship. It's very important. All of the students that win the award, we select 6 a year. All the students receive a $1,000 monetary award, and we shoot a video with each of them, allowing them the chance to tell their story so that their stories can be shared into classrooms. Because very often when we talk about education, what we often call special education, we talk about the difficulty that teachers and schools have in accommodating students, and we talk about the difficulties that these parents have with having these poor, sick kids, but we don't actually talk about what it is that these students are experiencing in their schools and the places that they are sent and the things that they are told. So really, that's what I work to do, is center those experiences and help make sure that all of those students that we select are also exposed to people like the people in this room, and they know what they can do in the places that they can go. Because that's what I experienced, and that's what I know when I was in high school, what I would have appreciated having that program for me. Yeah, so that's essentially what I do, and I'm really glad to be on the panel with all of you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for uplifting the stories of other young people, and continue to flex on them. All right, I'm going to turn it over now to Jalen Radzaminski, who is the judge, David L. Bazelon Center for Mental Health Law. Jalen is the founder of that organization. So turning it over to you, Jalen.
Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Jalen. I'm the Director of Engagement at the Bazelon Center. I'm also the founder of Count Us In, the first and only BIPOC disability-led voting and civic engagement organization in Indiana. And for a quick image description, I am a Black and Japanese person, so I have lighter skin, I have long braids on, and I'm wearing a red suit jacket and a black dress. And I can only echo y'all, I'm really excited to be here. I get fueled up being with fellow Black disabled folk, and over here I'm kind of writing little quotes from all of you just to hold nuggets of just motivation, because my peers really do help me thrive. So I identify with the disability community through my experiences with a mental health disability, as well as chronic compartment syndrome, which causes numbness and severe pain in my legs. I used to be a junior Olympian and a collegiate track athlete, but the pain was just too much, where I not only retire, I cannot walk long distances anymore without numbness and pain. So I developed some disabilities later in life, and some like mental health, I've navigated my entire life. Today, I just wanted to bring awareness to the need for peer-led, accessible, and community-based resources. My colleagues talked about the school setting. I wanted to bring in the campus mental health perspective as well as just the necessity of those services in the community at large for mental health services, and supporting civic engagement for Black disability community members. Through my experiences, just convening and organizing Black and other BIPOC disabled folk, both at the state and national level, community engagement and empowerment are just the key to building a more equitable and accessible world that I know a lot of us were not only dreaming of, but we urgently need. And just to kind of give background before I share my personal experience, Black people with disabilities, especially mental health disabilities, are not only at the high risk of arrest, incarceration, and fatal harm by law enforcement, but are just subject to racial discrimination in mental health settings when we try to get help, as well as in accommodation settings in the workplace and in schools. 1 in 20 law enforcement encounters involve people with mental health disabilities, and generally, Black people with disabilities experience a 53% chance of being arrested by the age of 28. I'm personally a survivor of mental health institutions and an unfortunate police response to my mental health crisis. And I can attest that community-based, non-carceral, home-like settings like a peer-led respite, or even just a Black peer-led phone line could have given me the space to not only authentically speak about what I was going through and some of my moments where I struggle, but also just have a space to heal that wasn't carceral or involuntary. I often say, and I know a lot of law enforcement have statistically agreed as well, it's going beyond training police officers on disability and mental health, but creating new systems that are led for and by us to keep us, keep the world accessible and keep us out of harm. And when I experienced a police response to my mental health struggle as a college student that was going through a developing disability at that time, more inclusive accommodations for both my mental health and my legs would have enabled me to get the support I needed instead of powering through and suffering in silence. And as many Black women, especially Black disabled women, understand how heavy it is to wear that mask to be Superwoman, and how heavy that mask is to carry, to constantly fight and stay resilient in navigating systems that weren't designed for us, and to push for change often in spaces that don't look like us. And I think Mr. Sherman, Sean, and Elijah, you all said it really well. It can be really difficult for people who identify as Black in the mental health disability space, or even just cross-disability at large, to not only identify what we can speak on for ourselves, but to advocate when our communities are constantly set up in silos. And I just wanted to applaud this administration and thank you all again for bringing us together, because for our nation to truly reach the goal of an accessible and a more equitable world, it requires us to have these conversations together, especially people in leadership and us as emerging leaders. I'm really honored about that, and I hope today that as a law student as well, that's working hard to join the ranks of just 3% of attorneys who identify as disabled and mere 5% of attorneys that identify as Black, I hope to also be able to contribute to the conversation and help build the world that we need. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Jalen, for continuing to work to transform our criminal legal system. I look forward to seeing all the things that you continue to do. I'm now going to turn it over to Nelly Latson, who is an advocate with the ARC of Virginia. Nelly, over to you.
Good morning. My name is Reginald Cornelius Latson. Most people call me Nelly, which is short for my middle name. It may sound like a cliche, but being here today is not only an honor, it is a dream come true. For years, when I was locked up in solitary confinement, I daydreamed about getting out and telling my story. I wanted to be a spokesperson. I wanted to stand up and speak out so that other autistic people and other black people and other black and autistic people would not experience the terrible things that happened to me. Thoughts like that sustained me through terrible times. So being here today at the White House really is that dream come true. Thank you for this invitation. I am 31 years old. In 2010, when I was an 18-year-old high school student, my life was hijacked. One morning, I was waiting outside the public library for it to open, and I was racially profiled. Someone thought I looked suspicious and called the police. The police officer who came to investigate searched me because the 911 caller had said something about a gun. Of course I didn't have a gun. I've never had a gun, ever. I was at the library for the same reason anyone goes to the library. I went to the library all the time. I showed the officer that I didn't have any weapon, but he kept asking me for my name. When I didn't give him my name, he said he was going to arrest me, and he pushed me against a car, and he physically restrained me. Like a lot of autistic people, I am very sensitive to being touched, especially if I am not expecting to be touched. I have what is called a fight or flight reaction, and that's what happened that day. When the police officer restrained me, I didn't think. I just reacted. I fought back, and I'm a strong person. I injured the police officer. I regret that. I'm sorry I hurt him, and I have apologized to the officer. After I was arrested, my mother tried to explain about my disability and what had happened. She also said loudly that this would not have happened to a white student. But this was 2010. The country wasn't yet talking about these issues, and the prosecutor did not want to understand. He charged me with serious felonies and got me sentenced to 10 years in prison. At my trial, the prosecutor actually used the R word against me. The prosecutor said that I was motivated by hate. He said I was using my autism and intellectual disability as a convenient excuse, and the jury believed him. After that trial, I got a new legal team. They worked with the highest level disability officials for the government of Virginia. The people at the State Disability Agency were shocked by my situation and wanted to help. They came up with a plan for me to go to a residential treatment center instead of prison, and they offered to fund it 100%. But the prosecutor opposed it. So instead, I spent several years in jail and prison. Most of the time I was locked up, I was held in solitary confinement. Some of the time, this was to protect me from dangerous people, but a lot of the time, it was to punish me. Due to my autism and intellectual disability, I had trouble with the rules, and I got punished for that. This is a common thing that happens to people with disabilities in jail and prison. Anyway, regardless of the reason I was in solitary, it was torture. Torture. I was not only alone in my cell without access to the light of day, I had no access to anything. Often, I was not allowed even to have books or paper or a radio or a television or even access to a phone. Nothing, just sensory deprivation. Sometimes I lost contact with reality. One of those times, they decided to move me from one cell to another. An officer pushed me up against the wall. So maybe you can guess what happened next. Fight or flight. Instinctively, I turned around to fight off the attack. I was shocked with a taser, and then they strapped me for hours and hours and hours in a restraint chair. When that was done, they gave me a new felony charge and another prison sentence. As bad as all that was, I know that I am lucky. I'm lucky first because of who my mother is. My mother is a U.S. Army veteran. She served for 11 years here in the U.S. and in Germany. And boy, oh boy, is she a fighter. She got things going. And then organizations like the ARC and the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network became my champions. Thanks to them and to dozens of articles in the Washington Post and other media, I was granted a conditional pardon by Governor Terry McAuliffe in 2015. That pardon released me to a residential treatment center that was better than being locked up, but actually still felt a whole lot like being in prison. After a couple of years there, I was allowed to move to a group home, where again I was always told what to do and when to do it, and I had very little ability to control anything at all about my life. Fortunately, I had shown that I would not be a danger to anyone. In 2021, Governor Ralph Northam granted me a second conditional pardon. And now, thankfully, I have no more restrictions on my freedom of movement. Though those felony convictions still haunt me, and they still will stay on my record unless I receive an unconditional pardon, which is something I hope for. I live in my own apartment now, and I get the supports and services I need to help me lead the life I want. I still have a lot of trauma to overcome, and I'm working on it. I am fearful, and it's hard for me to do a lot of things. I missed important years of learning. But I just learned this week that I have landed a job. It's actually kind of a dream job for me. And I hope in the future I will be able to come back and tell you about it. I am also happy that the activism and publicity about my case not only helped me, but also helped to make change for others. For example, the ARC of Virginia helped to pass legislation that will allow evidence of disability to be presented in criminal cases and will allow diversion rather than prosecution in prison. I hope in years to come, there will be many more successes like this. We have a long way to go. In closing, I want to thank you so much for this incredible opportunity to share my story.
Nelly, thank you so much for sharing, for opening yourself up as you did for us today. I know it was deeply moving for all of us to hear about your experiences, and we're just so honored to have you here with us today and to have you serving as an advocate. Congratulations on the job, and we just look forward to a bright, bright future ahead for you. I'm now going to turn it over to Raven Sutton, who is the National Black Deaf Advocates Youth Ambassador. Raven, over to you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Raven Sutton, and I'm happy to be here with all of you today. Thank you for sharing your stories and continuing to advocate for change. So again, I'm here with NBDA, National Black Deaf Advocates, and I was a part of a YES program, which is a summer camp, Youth Empowerment Summit Camp. I joined them when I was 17 years old. That camp truly impacted me in so many ways. It taught me how to advocate for myself, to be our own voices, and to make change and not allow the world to already define how they see us, and not to allow them to put us in a box. So we learned to fight for our rights and to fight for our community. Ironically, that year at 17, I joined that summer camp, and then later, I think it was February of that year, that same year, Trayvon Martin was killed, and that was my first time ever going to a protest. And you know, being born as a deaf person with a disability, you're automatically becoming an advocate for yourself. You automatically grow up to know that you are different from everyone else. And I always knew that I was different from other people. But when I was in, I knew that when I was in elementary school because I had special hearing aids with a little box in front of me where the teacher would always have to stand in front of me and speak through a microphone. So all of the kids would sit there and make fun of me all day, every day, asking me, "What's that in your ears? What are all those wires?" And they would say all kinds of things to me. But I always knew I was different from everyone else. And it wasn't until 5th grade that, I got all A's. I did all my schoolwork. I had great grades. And I remember looking back, and I had no interpreter in my program at that time. And I had a hearing impaired teacher at that time. That was the only person in my school that happened to know sign language. So socializing every single day, I had no one to communicate with. But I do remember being in school that they would call on names and they would do, a call-out list to see who made honor roll and who gets to go to the trip to the zoo. And I would always sit there and wait for my name to be called because, I always knew I had straight A's. So I was sitting there waiting, and never heard my name be called. So I asked the teacher, I said, what's up? I had straight A's. What's going on? And they said, oh, no, I'm sorry. Special ed students don't count. And I said to myself, what? I got straight A's. I don't get the reward like all the other students to go socialize and go have fun at the zoo? So from there, I always knew, I was not the same as everyone else. So with all that, a lot of teachers would always call me bad because, I was the class clown. I did always, talk. I was talkative. I wasn't paying attention because I didn't have an interpreter in my classroom and I didn't have the accommodations that I needed. And from my understanding, I didn't know what was going on around me. So, I was always distracted talking to other people, sitting around. I didn't know what else I was supposed to do. And I was just trying to engage with people. And, they labeled me as the bad kid. Later, once I transferred over to Alabama School for the Deaf in 8th grade, I joined that school and a lot of changes happened for me. I started hanging around other students that were just like me. My teachers signed, all the students signed. It was really accessible. I joined the cheerleading team. I was captain. I joined Academic Bowl. I was able to travel to different places. I went out of the country, went abroad with my school, and I even graduated as valedictorian. And I was the top of my class. So that would have never happened if I would have stayed in the public school system. And, I was just labeled as that bad kid that never paid attention. So once I graduated high school, I went to Gallaudet University, and throughout my experiences there, I grew to know that I wanted to provide the world was not accessible for Black women. It definitely was not accessible for a person with disabilities. Now, being a Black woman with a disability and being deaf, I knew that the world was not going to open its doors for me. So, I felt like I was stuck in a box. And I knew I'm way too big for this little box that the world wants to put me in. So I love the challenge. I love to challenge the system. I love to challenge the rules. And, there's nothing else. One size does not fit all. Deaf people do face communication barriers, and many people do not think about what our accommodation needs are, such as needing interpreters, closed captioning, whether we want to write back and forth. For instance, if I go to the hospital, they have no idea how to meet my needs. When I go to a public, just in general, when I go to a place, they'll say to me, oh, you know what, go ahead and, here, just take the free stuff. They don't want to deal with me. They don't even want to try to communicate with me and write something on a piece of paper. Something as simple as directions. I might text something on my phone to show them, and they're like, oh, no, I don't have time, never mind. And I still need to know where I'm going. So there are other ways that we can try to communicate with each other, such as writing back and forth or texting, but people just quickly freak out because they don't know how to communicate with me. They want to walk away. And typically, I put myself in a place where most people don't see deaf people. I want to change the narrative that deaf people can't dance, deaf people can't drive. What do you think that we do? Just sit at home all day? We have jobs. I love to dance. I love to go out. I love to go out with my friends. I love to party. you know, I get angry, I get happy, I get excited, I get all the emotions just like everyone else. And how people perceive me is that they get scared and then they want to run away. And for me, it's really interesting that, you know, the taboo out in the world of their view of deaf people and people with disabilities and Black people and all of the intersections that I have. And I'm sure you heard in our community, we say being Black is lit, but it's dangerous. So we're lit, but it is a dangerous life. And a lot of people have these misconceptions, which causes death in some cases, where people don't hear our needs. They don't see us as humans. Which puts our lives at risk. So what my job is, I work at Dawn, which is a domestic violence agency that serves, a nonprofit that serves deaf, deafblind, and disabled communities in the Maryland, DC, Virginia area. I'm also a content creator on social media. I create a lot of TikToks, Instagrams, and Reels to spread awareness about deaf culture and the deaf community. I also was on Netflix's reality television show called The Circle, and I was the first Black deaf person to be on a reality TV show. So I really like to change the narrative of how people view us. And just because deaf people have communication barriers does not mean that we can't survive. We just need accommodations, and all we need to do is explain our accommodations and for you to meet us halfway. There are different accommodations such as policies and rules, but you don't invite us to the table. You can't make these decisions as lawmakers without any commentary or input from the constituents that have disabilities. So we deal with this. You know, recently I just experienced an apartment fire. Where I live, which is the Arrive Apartments in Silver Spring, Maryland. The building caught on fire, and honestly, if I didn't have someone there to wake me up, I would have not woken up in time. I did request my apartment building to provide a strobe light as an accommodation, but they gave me the runaround and told me that I need to go to an audiologist, get some documents signed, and then I would need to go to a court to get signatures. And I literally told them, you know, I'm deaf. Like, I have these documents right here. And they said, no, we will not be able to provide you the strobe light that you need. And exactly what my worst fear actually happened. A fire happened in a couple floors above me. So I had to go to my leasing office and speak to the leasing manager, and that director no longer, the building that I went to go speak to the leasing manager, that director no longer works in that building, in that leasing office. And they had no clue that I was deaf, so when I was talking about emergency equipment and evacuation plan, I asked them, what are your plans for people with disabilities living in a high-rise apartment? Who are not able to evacuate or not use the elevator. So no one knew there that I was deaf. No one was able to communicate with the firefighters or anyone to know that there is a deaf person living in this apartment building, and, you know, not even sure how to evacuate or where to go. There was no type of communication whatsoever. So now the apartment is no longer livable. And so now I've been talking to different people and interpreters, and I'm struggling to find the resources and the communication and the information sharing. I have no idea what's happening, and I literally had to FaceTime my friend who's an interpreter and ask them and say, hey, are you available? Can you interpret for me? And they have to stop what they're doing to try to, work things out with me and help me in my situation. So I say all that to say that you can't talk about diversity and not include disabilities and deaf people in that conversation. You can't talk about community and not involve disabilities, people with disabilities in that conversation. It affects our lives, and if you continue to neglect us, you're gonna end up killing us. So yeah, that's that.
Thank you so much, Raven. Thank you for being here, despite all the things that I know are going on right now with you. Thank you for continuing to shatter boxes. Can I get just one more round of applause for all of our young leaders who shared with us today? So inspired by you all, and looking forward to the closed portion of this conversation. Thank you to everyone who joined us online for this conversation. I hope that you were encouraged. I hope that you were inspired, and inspired, not just in your personal lives, but inspired to reach out to us, to continue to communicate with us about the ways that we can improve as an administration and the ways that we can continue working and partnering with you. Thank you to our guests and our panelists from the administration, and all of you joining us here today. With that, I will conclude the live stream portion of this discussion. Thank you.